The Union protest rat, 10-foot tall inflatable, allegedly stabbed at Staab funeral home. The headline basically writes itself. Good morning. I want your reaction to this. 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here, live and local. I'm Greg Bishop with Springfield's Morning News. So news rolled in midday yesterday that there was a group of protesters outside of the Staab funeral home, and they had a 10-foot tall inflatable rat named Scabby. And they were protesting, apparently, Staab Funeral Home, using workers that weren't part of a union to do some construction work at the funeral home. But then, as the afternoon progressed and people were commenting on both sides of this all over social media, you then had somebody go in and stab, allegedly, Scabby, the 10-foot tall union protest rat, and it started to deflate. Here is the local report from News Channel 20 on this somewhat very Springfield-esque story. So check this out.
Well, crime alert now. A woman is facing charges after being arrested during a protest at Staab Funeral Home. 31-year-old Lauren Staab was arrested for criminal damage. Police say that she punctured a giant inflatable rat that was being used in the protest. Protesters say that they're protesting the funeral home for hiring a non-unionized roofer.
So what do you think about this? Number one, a couple of different angles here. Is it appropriate to set up a 10-foot tall rat outside of a funeral home where people are grieving? And then you can comment on just how Springfield-esque this story is. 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here with Springfield's Morning News. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Good morning, Greg. Yeah, I don't know when the proper time would be to protest out in front of a funeral home, but with that said, you know, all rats' lives matter, and this woman should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law because, you know, you can't just go around taking, you know, things into your own hands. I don't know where we've gotten into this, where everybody wants to take the law into their own hands these days.
Well, it's good to know that you're calling on behalf of PETA. Is there a stuffed animal contingent of PETA? Is there an inflatable animal? Okay, I gotcha. 217-629-7970 is the phone number. Good morning. Your thoughts?
Good morning. I've been dealing with this kind of stuff with the union for the last 20 years or so. I've had my personal life threatened, my family's life threatened, property threatened, calling our office, things like that. It's absolutely insane, the level of intensity that these people have towards wanting every single piece of work available out there and assuming that nobody else can do work like they can. It's ridiculous to me that they do this. And I don't know anybody that actually is like, oh, yeah, let's use the union now because of the way that they've treated everybody and the way that they're picketing and they're doing this stuff. I know more people that frequent those businesses and support those businesses for using non-union because it's ridiculous the way that they behave.
Well, and listen, I mean, I've seen Scabby, the union rat, set up elsewhere, protesting different types of places that might use union or non-union contractors, or there might be a union disagreement or something along those lines. And it's quite the display. I mean, you know, the pictures, of course, they have the big, long yellow sign that says, you know, whatever the message is that they want to put out there, but is outside of a funeral home where people may be grieving the death of a loved one. Is that the proper venue for this?
Well, it never is. And ultimately, it comes down to the leadership of those unions making that choice to send guys there to do that stuff. And you know what? I mean, I'm working on a lot of sites right now where there's union contractors, and every single site is behind schedule by 1 or 2 months on construction, specifically schools and things like that need to open in August. And that's around the state within a 3-hour radius. And I tell you what, you got union guys picketing and at Staab when, you know what, go put them to work at one of these sites that is so far behind schedule that kids are not going to be able to go to school on time. around the state.
Well, I'm curious if they're part of a union themselves, the people who are setting up the rats, who are inflating the rats, who are holding the large yellow sign. I'm curious if they're dues-paying members themselves and if that's a dues-paying job. Hey, I appreciate the call. 217-629-7970. That's the phone number for you to chime in here this morning. I know it's early, but this is a Springfield-esque story and your opportunity to chime in about Scabby, the union protest rat, a 10-foot-tall inflatable rat set up outside of Staab Funeral Home with people protesting Staab's choice of who they want to have contract. And instead of going with a union shop, apparently they went with a non-union shop. I'd be interested to compare how much one bid was versus the other, and what the ultimate outcome of the work's going to be. But the story elevated even more after somebody allegedly stabbed Scabby, the protest rat, at Staab Funeral Home. Your thoughts, 217-629-7970. Good morning.
Hey, morning, Bishop. Hey, like the previous caller said, I've dealt with, unions 20 plus years now too in the construction industry, and their strong arm tactics are just despicable. And then to do it in front of a funeral home where people are grieving, I mean, that's just downright subhuman. I don't condone the violence, but at least they took a stand. I mean, it's not really violence, I guess, but I used to work for a company that we had offices all throughout the country, and we had our main office in Chicago. The unions up there ran them out, and they were chasing employees down the interstate, tailgating them, going the wrong way on ramps. They went to the police. Police came out, talked to the union people, and then came up to our employee and said, sorry, it's a civil matter. There's nothing we can do. Of course they're not going to do nothing. It's time to stand up to the unions and their strong-arm mob mentality.
And we'll get more reaction on this. I appreciate the calls. 217-629-7970. That's the phone number. We're talking about Staab Funeral Home, protest outside there with a large sign that said, shame on you, and directed towards Staab Funeral Home with a 10-foot-tall rat that's inflatable. And somebody allegedly walked up and stabbed the rat while the protest was ongoing, and an individual has been arrested, and we'll see what ultimately happens with that particular case. And I imagine this is, if not already, going to make some national headlines just because of the headline itself. Inflatable rat Scabby allegedly stabbed at Staab Funeral Home. So get more of your thoughts on this. All right, 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here. You can always email me, bishoponair@gmail.com, or you can find me on social media. Just search out Bishop on Air, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and we can connect that way. We'll get more of your thoughts coming up. One that's coming in just now via text. It says, you hit the nail on the head. The union used to hire non-union members from Campbell Temporary Services for protests. All right. Well, if that's the case, that just adds another little twist in all of this. So reach out. I want to hear your thoughts. 217-629-7970. That's the phone number. More of your phone calls coming up here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and... All right, back taking your phone calls about Scabby, the union protest rat being allegedly stabbed outside of Staab Funeral Home. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, you'll be seeing some images of different Scabby sightings all across the country from Google Images. Holding up a sign saying, shame on so-and-so, and this thing's more than 10 feet tall, right? I mean, that's like 15, 20 feet tall. This thing's massive. But of course, Scabby, the union protest rat, protesting outside of Staab Funeral Home and allegedly being stabbed by a Staab employee. And some of the questions coming in, of course, are who are the picketers? Are they union members? Are they getting paid union wages? Somebody said that they are hired by temporary staff, but somebody else saying that is not the case. And getting a message here on Facebook saying they're not typically hired picketers at those types of demonstrations. Those are typically members and agents, sometimes laid off. Other times members donate them time twice a year to do this. Just again, these are possibilities, and I'm not saying anything definitive, but I want to hear from you, your thoughts on this. Not just about the alleged stabbing of an inflatable rat named Scabby by a possible Staab employee. It's also raising the question about when is it appropriate for unions to do these types of protests. You have a First Amendment right to peaceably assemble with others and to address government in particular for a redress of grievances. Now, this particular protest outside of Staab, it was on the sidewalk, which is entirely in bounds. One thing I've always understood about protests is you have every right to be on public property and protest. However, you cannot impede the free flow of individuals unless you get some kind of permit from police to allow for that. And I don't know the legalities of whether or not they had a permit out there that day, but it being at a funeral home raises some questions, and a lot of people commenting online about one comment on 217 Problems, which posted this, and it's already got over 1,000 comments and 141 shares. It says, "How tacky. There are probably funerals and visitations trying to be conducted, and it's so disrespectful for those families. Take an ad out in the paper, blast them on Facebook, but come on." So when's the appropriate time to protest? 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here. I'm talking about the Staab Funeral Home being protested by unions to essentially highlight how Staab didn't use union contractors for a job that Staab wanted. Staab is not a public entity. I don't think they have to comport with the prevailing wage standards, and maybe that's one of the beefs that this particular union outfit has. And there's obviously a place for unions, including collective bargaining for benefits and wages and work conditions. But does this go above and beyond what the union is meant for, to go and, as some callers said last segment, to strong arm people? I want to hear from you. 217-629-7970. Again, that's the phone number here live and local, 217-629-7970. You can also email bishoponair@gmail.com, and you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Just message me that way. Your thoughts. The story, it's ripe for Saturday Night Live. It's ripe for all the late night talk shows. I imagine that it's already making the circuits and getting in front of people, just because the headline itself is pretty remarkable, but a very Springfield-esque story. So what are your thoughts? 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Got a couple of text messages here. One saying, "Go Union," with some hands clapping. Another one says, "That rat is BS, a form of extortion, a bully tactic. A few picketers would have been sufficient." So interesting to get those comments, and you can always chime in either by phone, 217-629-7970, or you can send me a text message if you've got my cell phone number, or email me as well, or message me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. Just make that happen here, talking about Scabby the union rat being allegedly stabbed outside of Staab Funeral Home yesterday. And again, the question, is it appropriate? Is that the appropriate setting? To have a 10, 15-foot tall rat, an inflatable rat, outside of a funeral home where there could have been families inside grieving the loss of a loved one. And is this type of demonstration appropriate at all? Staab's not a government entity. People have a right to redress their grievances, but is it appropriate to have it outside of a business, for instance, especially a funeral home? Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Yeah, I'm pro-union, but that's stepping the boundaries. People's last ride of their life should be somewhat peaceful. I don't think protesting there like that, whoever the caller or the person that wrote, do an ad, take an ad out, or blast them on a billboard or whatever, But for the union rat, I heard that Flex Seal tape works pretty good if they need it.
Yeah.
To,
And, hey, it just shows that Scabby has some battle scars, right? If they
Right.
if they do it right, they can make it look pretty good and actually give Scabby some street cred. Appreciate the call, 217-629-7970. Your thoughts on this. And one thing that makes me think about this, too, is the idea. You remember Westboro Baptist Church? They were setting up some protests outside of funerals. And there were actually some efforts to try to limit that type of protestation outside of funerals, especially funerals of service members. Gosh, what was that? That had to have been 10 years ago or so. And there were efforts to limit people doing First Amendment protests. But your thoughts on this? Very Springfield-esque story. Scabby the union rat being allegedly stabbed outside a Staab funeral home. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Good morning, Greg. I think if they wanted to have a couple picketers out front, I wouldn't have had a problem with that. I think the rat is a very condescending attempt to humiliate or bully someone. And did the lady really need to be arrested? The thing is, that was a family business, and I could, see why she would put a needle in that thing. Somebody did the same thing to one of those Trump balloons that they were flying one time. I don't think anyone was arrested. The thing is, I wouldn't want that rat, if I had a business and if they wanted to intimidate me, I'd be doubling down. That's very childish. It's kind of like extortion.
Yeah, and you got to think, too, and several of you have said this, this is not going to win some people over, and I appreciate the calls, 217-629-7970. This is likely going to lead to others to say, you know what, this type of display is a step too far. I'm going to take my money to places that don't feed into this type of what some, as you've heard the callers say, is bullying and intimidation and a level of extortion. And these are tactics that aren't very helpful to foster civil discourse. And listen, like I said, there are absolutely reasons to have a union. But sometimes the unions don't necessarily, especially even in the public sector, they seem to just comply with somebody from their mindset, correct political persuasion. For instance, somebody shared with me that they're starting to do COVID-19 testing daily at a state facility for all employees entering. I don't know all of the particulars, but I don't know if it's, if you're vaccinated or not, or regardless, you got to get a COVID-19 test. But some people feel that violates their rights. And one source told me that the union wants nothing to do with it. Wants nothing to do with standing up for that individual's rights as they feel that they're being trampled. So there are places for the union. Sometimes the union doesn't necessarily display that type of behavior to make it an avenue for people to feel comfortable going to. I've also heard countless instances, especially in the public sector unions, where there are serious concerns about management and management in creating toxic work environments with multiple, evidentiary documents that they're able to provide, but the union doesn't really do anything about it. Instead, they, talk about politics. Instead, they talk about just, increasing pay. But sometimes people are critical of the union for not doing what they feel is in their best interest. But on the other side, again, unions, collective bargaining, there's a purpose there for, wages, for benefits, for work conditions. I don't know if setting up a 15-foot tall inflatable rat is the way to get your message across. 217-629-7970 is the phone number. Another text coming in this morning says the difference is the Patriot Guard. Oh, this is about the West Baptist. Stood between the Westboro nuts. There's nobody to stand between grieving families and the union nut jobs. Again, that's just another comment here this morning. And you can always send your comments in. bishoponair@gmail.com or message me on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Another message coming in via Twitter says, if I recall, the Scabby rats used to be made in non-union shops for many years. Kind of ironic. All right, well, again, that's just another statement and a position here. Somebody else says, serves no purpose. To be tested, that is. I was getting written up. Union did not help me, one person says. So again, just getting your thoughts here this morning. Very Springfield-esque story of Scabby, the union rat, allegedly getting stabbed outside a Staab funeral home. And likely hear more about this story in the days and weeks ahead. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and